today will be Professor Dr. Nurul Miza Rashid. She is one of the lecturers in psychology in International Islamic University of Malaysia. Before the session begins, let me inform how the presentation will be going on. First, Prof. Dr. Nurul Miza will present the material. After that, there will be a question or discussion session and followed by conclusion. Now, let me allow to welcome the speaker, Professor Dr. Nurul Miza, to deliver her presentation. Professor Dr. Nurul Miza, time is yours.
Thank you, Brother Hanif. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's nice to be called professor. I take that as a prayer, inshallah. In Malaysia, with like especially IIUM, a full professorship would be a very, very senior lecturer. So yeah, but thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today. So I'll be basically, I think I will just jump into the topic. Of course, it'd be good if we can have a discussion. No need for formalities. We spent about 7-8 hours together, inshallah. So for my topic, I think it's a topic that is rather timely and also like quite like a necessary for us to understand, even though it's something that has been talked about. Apa yang kita cakap ni tentang keganasan ekstremis biasanya. Dekat Indonesia sendiri ada rasanya perbezaan antara kita dengan apa dekat di Malaysia, keganasan ekstremis itu sendiri. Saya baru like about 1 month back, I was actually staying in Jakarta. I was staying inside Shangri-La Hotel, and the thing is that the hotel is fully guarded, along with also like several other hotels, Marriott hotels as well. I want to ask my students and also anyone here, can you guys tell me why is it fully guarded? It's actually up to the point that it has about 3-4 meters high of gate wall. And then on top of that, it also has K9 dogs. So whenever the cars coming in, vans coming in, yes, they actually make inspection. Would you like to know why? Do you know why? What about the students here from UMS? Do you guys know why? Because it could have happened before you were born, actually. You know why? You don't know. Anyone? Come on, no. Anyone? Yes, the bombing, all right, the Jakarta bombing. It happened twice. So one of them actually happened in 2003. How many of you were born in 2003? Oh, all right. How many of you were born 2002?
Ooh.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it did happen when you guys were very, very young. Okay. So that there was actually 2 bombings basically that occurred, and not in just Jakarta, but basically Indonesia had several cases of terrorism here. Yes, several cases of terrorism here. However, in Malaysia, it's slightly different. I would say it's major, like there's a massive difference, of course. What we have is that in Indonesia, like I would say like the culture, of course, is significantly different. They have also like multi-ethnicity, but however for ours there is actually a stark difference in terms of different types of ethnicity. Orang berbagai etnik, berbagai religion juga, berbagai budaya yang mereka ada. So for this, when we think about this, of course, it introduces to the fact that there's what we call as intergroup differences, which I'm pretty sure you guys are completely aware of, right? Intergroup differences can come in many forms, and basically there are many ways we could be different from one another. One of the first thing that we are different from one another here is actually the fact that the most basic, kita perbezaan jantina, right? Different gender. All right, or different sexes. So that's actually a difference itself, intergroup differences. On top of that, also we have different nationalities here that we have from Indonesia, and of course we have from Malaysia. In addition to that, we also have someone from Kashmir. Is there anyone that I'm missing out? I do want to mention all the countries here. No? Right, cute. And then when it comes to these differences, it allows different forms of thinking. All right, it also kind of encompasses different forms of behaviors as well. Okay. And then up to that, somehow we could eventually, what we do is that like we could actually like present a potential clash, a conflict, all right, or tension between people of differences. Can anyone tell me, would like to at least provide your own reasoning why that happens? From your own point, like from your own experiences, of the knowledge that you have learned, why is that? What do you think? Why is there potential tension between us, a conflict between us? Sorry, pardon? Conflicting ideologies, yes. But why does it have to be a conflict in you? Lack of understanding, okay. What else? Sorry? Differences, yes. But why do we need that tension? Why does it exist? Identity? Okay, I'll tell you one of the things that I'm going to explore. Sometimes it's as basic as our self-esteem. All right, okay, so this is a kind of a concept that I do want to explore with you a bit. I'll go through, there's a lot of tiers I'll go through. Something is basically like, something as basic as self-esteem. Like, can anyone tell me what self-esteem is? No? Alright, okay, let's go to the next slide. Budak psychology tak tahu sih aku. But I think because I'm gonna go on and on. I don't want to take time. I just forgot. So what I'm going to go through is that basically I'm just going to mention briefly some of the selected conflicts that have occurred, like selected incidences. Some of the incidences that have happened in Malaysia, there are actually quite a few, but I'm just going to highlight selected few that I do believe is relevant. On top of that, I'm just going to explain to you selected theories that are rather common and talked about when it comes to this topic. I'm pretty sure you have seen some of these topics as you go through, especially if you've been through my social psychology class. And then we're going to talk a little bit about individual differences as well. And then some research evidence, especially from my research, if we do have time. And then hopefully we can talk about resolution and recommendations. Okay, next. All right, okay. So let's just briefly, because I do believe it's important to bring about the history of Malaysia. So Malaysia, of course, is one of the country in Southeast Asia. We have multi-ethnic, multi-religion groups. So this is one of the important statistics that I do want to bring to you, because this is actually one of the key differences that could actually cause rise in tension. And actually, like, there is actually a surging tension. So Malaysia has a current population is 34.31 people, and then we basically have majority Bumiputra as well as majority Muslim. So for the Bumiputra, basically consisting of the Malays, especially including of those native indigenous in Sabah and Sarawak as well. Right, there's about 70.3%. The rest Chinese and Indians, and there's also other ethnicities as well. Likely they are within the refugees, because we're inclusive of we're talking about the population, not the citizens actually. And then on top of that, we also have Muslims, 61.2% in terms of religion. Other religion, we do have Buddhism, we have Hinduism, Christianity, atheists, and also we do have others or non-specified. All right. Despite that, so we do have majority of Muslims. So overall, there's actually like a large majority, and there's also other minorities, and there could be actually existing tension between those within the minorities and majority group. And this is actually another thing that's been talked about as well. So aside from self-esteem, there's another rising cause of tension. Can you guys tell me, relating to the minority majority aspect, would you guys be able to tell me the factor causing that tension? Sorry? Sorry, can you repeat that? The 3R issues? Which? Well, not quite that. I was gonna go somewhere else. I'm gonna go deeper into that actually. What else? What do you think? Because you guys are really looking at the kind of, like, I would say, surface level thus far. Kinda, yeah, you're getting there. So sometimes it's just basically about the rights. It's like, equal rights. So if you think about it, yeah, the racial, like religion factor. Sorry, what was it again? Race? Race, religion, royalty. When you look at these are the topics that are being discussed. When in actuality, sometimes people what they want is that even if it's race factor, religion factor, is usually what they want is that their rights, their demands, the basic thing. When we talk about the Maslow's theory, right, we do talk about like the hierarchy of needs. The most basic things is just physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness needs. Just think of these basic facets, and then the idea is that they feel that their group are not getting that. All right. Okay. So it's basically just people feeling that they need more, or they desire more, or they require more, but they're not getting that. Okay. So it's something as basic as that. These are just basic psychological things that we've learned about. All right. If we go back to that rule, we will realize that how, I wouldn't say how simple it is, but rather how the fact that we can actually try to see the intergroup tension existing across many countries is almost similar. It's just that in terms of the other factors, the social factors, maybe perhaps what you say, like the race, religion, the type of groups that exist. So those are just like, that's just reasoning. That's just sort of like excuses that people actually bring up because they deep down inside, perhaps what they want is just this, the rights, the privileges. All right, next. Thank you. Right, okay, so Malaysia itself, of course, like so we are basically majority Muslim country. All right, Alhamdulillah, thus far we can consider ourselves as the most, like I wouldn't say the most, but we are among the most peaceful, actually, in terms of like country which encompass majority Muslims. We do not have reports. We do not have reports of extreme violence, I would say. All right, next. However, we do have the risk of it. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with this. Just last year, the end of 2022, we had the national general election. All right. And during that time, basically social media became like such a large thing. And I think Indonesia, inshallah, will have your national election as well. And I have heard of the fact that this is also a key time actually for people within, like, I basically, when I came over to Jakarta, like, I was actually communicating with I think the terrorist agency. Actually, you do have, like, the anti keganasan agency. I think it's called BNPT. So they basically, like, realize that there's actually key time, what we call key time for potential rise of conflict. Just recently what we have experienced is basically, like, for instance, the Palestinian issue as well. There's a lot of I would say risk of misinformation, risk of racial tension, so on and so forth. All right, in this regard, at this time, you can actually, like, if you use the Palestinian issue, you would see a lot of tensions between people who are pro-Israel and people who are pro-Palestine. Even though in Malaysia, the majority voices are indeed, for pro-Palestinian. However, you need to consider other countries, this might be different. That's why there are people who are unwilling to speak up. But whenever people speak up, it became like, a constant kind of like berates of like curse words, basically online. Okay. Yang kemudiannya, have you heard of this one? So the use of word Allah is a very sensitive issue in Malaysia Islam. Sangat sensitif menggunakan perkataan Allah itu kerana kalau boleh perkataan Allah itu hanyalah kepada, like, orang Melayu Islam. Okay. Sebab mereka consider that the perkataan Allah tu is basically related to the religion of Islam. When in actuality, if you know, the word Allah is actually not really, like, it's not, it's not that it's not tied to Islam, but rather it's basically it's from the Arabic language. It just means God, the God. All right. Okay. So therefore, other religions, like, Christianity do use this term as well. However, in Malaysia, it's a very sensitive issue because it's been established. Basically, majority religion is, pardon me, Islam, and the others are very minority. 60% are basically Malays. On top of that, they don't use the word Allah within their, because of the language itself. All right, okay, like, we do not, basically we do learn the Arabic language, however, it's not really a practice. So therefore, there could be cause of misinterpretation and confusion as well, which is what is feared within Malaysia itself. And then basically this issue was basically like the spark. It's been around for a long time. So back in 2010, the use of Allah to refer to God by non-Muslims became a sensitive matter. So there was actually, like, a huge, like, conflict, up to the point that there was actually about 11 churches, 1 Sikh temple, 3 mosques, and 2 Muslim prayer became targets of arson actually. So these are actually, like, the rare incidents of actual violence being used in Malaysia, like, considering about, like, we call it as extreme violence. Okay, next. Then we have this. So this wasn't exactly a case of extreme violence. However, we can consider it as another form of perhaps politically based violence. So this is basically by the Hindu community. So I talked about the rights, right? Basically, people, who might be different, they perceive that because of this difference that they have, they cannot get what they want. They feel like, is it because of my skin color? All right. Is it because of what I practice, etc.? All right. That does occur. In that regard, maybe it's rather subtle, like, but to these people, it became to the point that they feel like it's not, like, this is a form of injustice. So therefore, there was actually a Hindu community, basically, like, perform a rally to basically bring attention to the government about racial discrimination, religious intolerance, inequitable share of the nation's wealth, and unfair treatment of Malaysian. I wouldn't say this is actually like a hidden truth, when in actual it's actually an obvious thing. Sorry, okay, it's an obvious, like, like incident that is going on. However, the problem was that, this rally eventually kind of like created attention because of the way the government cracked down towards, like, for these protesters. All right, there's actually became a genuine sensitive issue. Next. All right. And have you heard of this one? Sri Maha, sorry, mostly talking, I see a lot of my students there, but this one is actually another case. So this is back in 2010. 2010, basically, there was a little bit of conflict within the community in Gombak, near our university, actually. It was very much close to our university. What happened was that the Hindu community there basically got, like, I would say it's actually, I would say a conflict and misunderstanding between the developer and the temple, basically the temple community. However, because of this situation, this brief misunderstanding, a pre-existing something that basically has already been there, the tension between especially the Hindus and the majority Muslims, was basically like, it became kind of like a severe situation during that time. All right, because like, again, temple is very much like, something is that is I would dear to the Hindu community in Malaysia itself. And so therefore, like, this misunderstanding eventually caused, like, like riot, caused an uproar to the point that one man died. Unfortunately, one of the firefighter passed away, unfortunately, during the event itself. Okay, all right, next. And then we have, like, one of the most popular and the oldest situation that we have was the 1969 riots, which I'm pretty sure all of you are very familiar with. For our Indonesian counterparts here, so for this 1969 riots, basically, it's quite almost like, a few years after our independence. What happened was that basically we had the Malaysian general election, which was announced like, within that year, and the opposition parties, which is actually like, considered to be the supporting the Chinese community, considering that because like that felt like a threat to them, a threat to the Malaysian Muslim community, especially the Malay communities, especially they felt like, what if the Chinese became basically the leaders of the country? So to them, that is actually a very sensitive issue. And then eventually it caused basically like almost 200 civilians, deaths of 200 civilians due to the ongoing violence itself. So that's actually one of the most prominent, I would say, basically it's just not one of it's the most prominent incident of intergroup violence that have ever occurred in Malaysia itself. Right, next. And then, of course, not to discount the fact that not only we do have our Malaysian citizens in Malaysia as well, we do have refugees. All right, we do have immigrants. We do not really need to talk about the others who are more privileged. When we talk about the refugees, of course, when they come to the country, the reason why they are there is to basically seek for assistance. However, what happens is that sometimes they are denied that, mostly because of the differences that they might have and the perception that the local communities might have against refugees themselves. And there are cases of racism, discrimination, basically the like ongoing tension, to the point that sometimes, what happens is that there are certain areas whereby especially the Rohingya communities are residing in. The Malaysians consider them as like, like a bad area that they would never touch. Actually, they would never enter themselves. Right, next. Right. And then this is actually, something that is very, very recent. When you look into this, so we have the Palestinian Solidarity Week. Now I have the question to you. What do you think of this incident? In your opinion, is it a case of concern, or to you it's actually something that should be kind of like should be overlooked or should be accepted? So just about like, a couple of weeks ago, around like, like in October, I believe it was 26th or 25th October, Malaysian Prime Minister has decided to create Palestinian Solidarity Week. All right. On top of that, basically what has been encouraged is for schools in Malaysia to basically like create events, educate or whatever it is to follow that theme, Palestinian Solidarity Week. This is basically to raise awareness about the issue. The like Palestinian, the Gaza-Israeli war, especially. However, what has happened is that all of a sudden what went up online is that there are photos of young children holding miniature toy guns. All right. So we do have like basically just toy guns being like, being put around school. All right. that has basically kind of like caused a stir in Malaysia. There's actually two opinions of this matter. One is that they feel that extremism, especially violent extremism, Islamist extremism, is spreading within school. But the other opinion is that, this is actually not an issue. It's just basically showcasing solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Now, I do want to ask you, there's no wrong opinion here. In your thoughts, your own personal perception, would you consider this an issue, or is this something that we can actually overlook? You can actually overlook. Good. Thank you, Heather. Why do you think that is? Mm, yeah. True. That's a fair point, indeed. What about Brother Hanif here? In your opinion, it's an issue. Why is that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. It's an issue. Okay. Who else has another opinion? How about our MC? Nuril, right? Yeah. Okay. How about what do you think, Nuril? Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Yes. Yeah. True. Right. Right. Who else? They just follow there. Yeah. Or anyone else? Okay. Raise your hand if you think it's an issue. Okay. Okay. Raise your hand if you do not think it's an issue. Raise your hand if you're divided. It's okay. You can. Yeah. Sorry? How about both? Both, okay. So this is like, it's an interesting thing when you say that if you give a kid a gun and say they can teach them violence. I'll tell you a little bit of a funny story. Just about a couple of days ago, I went to Toys R Us. All right, okay. You know how they have a gun section? There's actually a lot of them, right? And then basically my husband's like, I can't wait to buy this for my kids. And I said, no, I don't want it to teach violence because I'm doing this area. So that there's a little bit of divide there, but kids love these things as well. They just see them as toys. But like, what are we really teaching our kids? So I do want to go to Tasha. Tasha just said that it's both. Like, I am of the opinion that, you know, I'm quite divided about the fact that how do we not allow children to actually have toys? Do we just like seize this from like, from their knowledge immediately? Or do we allow them to have it? But yeah, Tasha, can I have your thoughts? Why do you think it's both? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yes. Yes. It can be both, right? Who else? I who? Okay. Expanding on that. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Uh, see. It's interesting that you're pointing that out. I should have put a different photo. That is the kids were parading around with the guns. So you're saying the innocent, I decided to put innocent photos because I'm against showing photos of children actually. But actually, yeah, they are photos, the kids like basically come parading the gun, marching. Yes, yes, marching. That even though yes, it's toy guns. So therefore I agree with you. Like in a way, yes, there should be I would say there should be a balance indeed. But like if we are teaching them to be so fearful of this gun, so fearful of the situation, so anti-violence as well, you might actually cause them to basically like not being exposed to the alternative part as well, and then perceiving like, like perhaps even perceiving the wrong people as enemies as well. All right. Okay. In that regard, like for example, let's say like, there's actually a military man trying to assist, they perceive them immediately as an enemy as well. But it's actually a difficult, I would say, it's a difficult thing to balance, difficult thing to assess. However, we are moving forward. As we are moving forward, majority opinions is that we should say no to violence completely. All right. Okay. So perhaps as we are moving towards that, maybe this is no longer accepted as well. All right. Okay. Next. Anyway, okay, so the thing that you should know, of course, so that's a brief history. So what is intergroup conflict, what is intergroup tension, and what is violent extremism and non-violent extremism? So for the intergroup tension, of course, when there is actually an ongoing presence of what we call as uneasiness, all right, feeling of discomfort, feeling of potential, like, something is going to happen, feeling of like, as if when you're in the presence of someone else, you feel that you cannot really be yourself. All right. Okay, and you feel like there's somewhat a strained relationship. These are because this is basically as a result of interpersonal differences such as social background or goals and values. Then we have the conflict aspect. It's basically the severe form of this tension. So initially we do have this tension because we notice you and I are different, right? As a result of that, we could potentially use aggression and violence because you and I are different. But why do we do so? Something that I want to explore further. Next. In the most extreme form, next slide, there you go, we have what we call as extremism. Now, the difference between intergroup tension and extremism is that intergroup tension just clarifies that there is an ongoing discomfort between two groups of people who might be different from one another. All right. Extremism is basically just another subset of it. The reason why we have to talk about extremism is that extremism could be a result of these differences. All right. Extremism refers to the fact that there is an idea, or there is a reason, or there is a cause that you might hold on to. All right. You might grab onto, you might have, that is different from normal people. Okay. Any of you are into Hello Kitty here? No? All right. All right. Into Hello Kitty. Okay. In an extreme manner, Sakina? It's not normal, right? But it's okay. You do you. As long as it's not violent, as long as you don't get angry at people for living like if people don't love Hello Kitty. But let's say that Sakina, I'm sorry for using your name, but let's say Sakina's love for Hello Kitty is to the point that she wants to spread it to everyone. If anyone goes against her, if anyone says no to Hello Kitty, she would be upset. All right, she would be upset, and then she would put online, be like, save Hello Kitty, save the Hello Kitty culture. All right, okay. Like she would cry for Hello Kitty, etc. Okay, and then she would fight for the cause. She would create banners. All right, she would create banners. She would create stickers just to promote Hello Kitty. All right, but but they might be two ways she's doing this. She might have the non-violent way, and as she starts to begin an Hello Kitty community, Hello Kitty group. Now, for the non-violent way, what they might do is that they might just spread propaganda about Hello Kitty. All right. They might just spread online, start arguing with people, telling people, no, you should like Hello Kitty. All right. And then she would have everything from her scarf to her toenails, and everything is Hello Kitty culture. Sakina, I still like you. But anyway, because I'm trying to draw your attention here, I can see you. But anyway, but what if that's not enough? There's a possibility that she gets angry. So she starts creating Hello Kitty guns. All right, whereby she starts using violence, so that would be the violent forms of extremism. All right, it starts off with her love for Hello Kitty, the idea that Hello Kitty is good, and she wants the entire world to be painted with Hello Kitty. All right, okay. In other ways, perhaps if we're talking about it, maybe just perhaps values. All right, anyone here is into Blackpink? Who was it? I think no, who had the Blackpink? Wani. Okay, I'm sorry, Wani. You're my next victim. So let's say like One is a big fan of Blackpink, right? And then suddenly someone says that they hate Blackpink. They don't want to go to Blackpink concert. One got upset. Basically, she drew out like a knife, saying that how dare you? So that's a violent form of extremism. All right, basically, even though it's another term is actually basically we call fanatic, but when it comes to extremism itself, it's about the ideology itself. All right, ideology usually they want to further a cause. So for Wani, perhaps it's Blackpink. For Sakina, perhaps it's actually Hello Kitty. For the rest of you, maybe it's different. All right. Okay, next. So what are the psychological theories that can be helpful to explain this? So in Malaysia, the one that we talked about is actually there's quite a lot of intergroup differences, right? Intergroup differences, we also have the varying ideologies as well. Okay, when it comes to intergroup differences, we can immediately highlight the intergroup differences between Malays, Chinese, and Indians are the major, like kind of like the major, I would say the major ethnicities in Malaysia that is constantly brought into the news about their differences and how they want their differences to be basically accepted, acknowledged, and they can be who they want to be. All right, okay. Other than that, we also have religions differences. We have basically Islam, Christianity, Buddhism. We also have other religions such as Taoism, so on and so forth, and Hinduism as well. But basically, the fact that these groups they do exist, and somehow what happens is that they have differences between them in terms of values and practices. Okay, and then tensions would rise, but it's not because of these existing differences. Mostly because they might feel a certain type of threat to who they are. So just now I talked to you about the self-esteem aspect. All right. On top of that, I talked about the right aspect. All right. There's actually another theory that I did not include here, the evolutionary aspect, the evolutionary theory of psychology. What we're trying to say is that, when we realize that maybe perhaps someone else is different than us, we feel like, what if we can't be who we are? We would lose ourselves. All right. We can't practice our values. So that might be one of the aspects. So these differences create that tension, and I'm going to explain that further from some of these theories. And then on top of that, what I want you to think about is that the fact that some people perhaps feel that I can't perhaps I can't have what I need because of who I am. All right. Again, there is also a threat to the existence of the group itself. Okay. All right. Next. So the first theory that I do want to talk to you about is like scapegoating theory. How many of you have heard this theory before? I think you're familiar. I put it in my final exam question. Yes, I did. But anyway, so for the scapegoating theory, now this is actually one of the theory that I've decided to test. It's basically you feel like as if that, there's actually a frustration within you. All right, a frustration within you. Now, if you guys can tell me, why do you guys get frustrated? Tell me the last time you were frustrated. This morning you have to wake up for subuh early? Done it? No? Astaghfirullahalazim. That's a blessing. When was the last time you got frustrated? Yes, tell me. Oh. All right. Okay, you got frustrated because the mosquito. Okay. Usually, the thing is that when you get frustrated, there's something that is hindering your goal. So the mosquito was hindering your goal from doing what? There you go. Okay. All right. Who else got frustrated recently? Aside from mosquitoes preventing you from sleeping, what else? Yes. Astaghfirullah. Tell me, what are you frustrated about with your FYP? Tell me, what is it? What is your goal and what's hindering you from getting that? Sorry? Yourself? Yourself. Okay. All right. You have an intergroup attention with your own self. I understand that. That's fine with me. But anyway, all right, kids. So there are moments whereby we get frustrated, usually because what we want gets blocked. That happens, right? It does happen. Now, usually, how would you react to this kind of situation? You get angry, you storm out, you hit a door, or you just go to sleep. Anyway, but not everyone does that. So I'm gonna go back to perhaps Sakina. I'm sorry, Sakina. I'm sorry, Sakina. So let's say that she got frustrated, right? She got frustrated with the fact that she can't spread Hello Kitty to the world, right? She only gets to be within your age. But anyway, within Star members, but she can't spread it to the world, so she gets quite frustrated. Her goal is to have everyone wear Hello Kitty t-shirt, all right? But however, she can't quite have that. So what happens is that she feels like there's someone else to blame for it. All right, she feels like someone should be blamed. It's not me. All right, someone out there is preventing me from having everyone wearing a Hello Kitty t-shirt. All right. And she managed to identify that person as Natasha. Because Natasha's been complaining about. So what does she do? She became aggressive. All right. So that's what the scapegoating theory is all about. The thing is that because they feel that as if that, they should never blame themselves if anything bad happens to them. All right. There's always someone else to blame. All right, okay. Usually in the real life case, for example, I'm going to give you a relevant example. So there was actually a recent incident of like basically the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic basically affected it affected everyone all over the world. All right. But like it's interesting enough the fact that people said that the virus originated from China. The virus originated from China, but what happens is that people just immediately blame China for it because they feel frustrated. They feel like they can't do this, they can't do that, and they can't blame themselves. So they just find an immediate scapegoat. The interesting thing is that in Malaysia itself, it also happens. In Malaysia, instead of blaming the Chinese people, what happens is that they find an easier target. They blame the immigrants, saying that because like yeah, we are different. I've done my part, I'm good, I'm safe. But these immigrants, they're different than us. They have a different culture, they are uncivilized, so they should be blamed for the rise in COVID-19 infection. All right. The reason why we're choosing our target sometimes is because it's easy, perhaps because of the hierarchy issue. We feel like they're below us. All right. So they're the cause of bad fortunes, perhaps. All right. Yes, go on. Mhm, mhm, mhm. It's interesting that you mentioned if there is some truth to it, okay? The thing is that what I want to highlight is that regardless of the truth in it, all right, it doesn't mean that that person or that group deserves to be discriminated against, deserves to be treated badly. And the problem is that when it comes to especially racism, discrimination, people do not look at the individual. People look at immediately the whole community and assumes that basically everyone in the community is the same. All right. There's so many things I can talk to you. When that happens, then immediately you do not realize the root cause of the problem. All right. Instead of addressing the root cause of the problem. So let's say, for example, you're saying that, hey, these people, sorry, like this group of like, like perhaps refugees, immigrants, or whatever it is, it's like the practice that is bad. For example, the hygiene stuff. Instead of blaming the group, how about correcting the hygiene? Because if you're just immediately blaming the group, you're not solving the problem. All right, you're not actually addressing the issue itself. So when people do the scapegoat aspect, they just immediately identify a person to blame without really solving the root cause. Okay, all right, next. All right, okay. So the second theory is called as intergroup trait theory. So this is by Stefan and Stefan. So for the intergroup, I kept saying that integrated trait theory says that there are four types of threats that exist. Four kind of like categories of threats that exist. All right. I don't know why my car's getting like, do you not remember this? Can anyone tell me what's intergroup anxiety? So we have intergroup anxiety. We also have what we call as negative stereotypes. We also have realistic threats and symbolic threat. I'm just going to bring my attention to the two at the bottom here. The one at the top is actually fairly simple because intergroup anxiety is that the tension, maybe perhaps the anxiety that you feel when you realize that there's someone else that you do not know or different than you have to engage with them. All right. Whereas negative stereotypes is simple. Basically, this assumption that you have, this knowledge that you think that you have, you ingatkan you tahu seseorang, but they are all bad things about them. How do you base this on? Basically, based on like their skin color, their like the language they speak. That's all. All right. Okay. And then the two at the bottom, realistic threat and symbolic threat. Now, realistic threat, again, it's almost like the frustration that we talked about just now. Is your goal, what you want is being blocked. Now, this time what we're going to talk about is the potential of that happening, potential of what you have, potential of what you feel like, is your right. Or perhaps like, your safety, your well-being, so on. You feel like it could be taken away from you. All right, so that's the realistic threat aspect. Okay, now for the symbolic threat, on the other hand, it's mostly like, that it's mostly perception. Realistic could be a real thing that could be taken away from you, something that has already been taken away from you. For example, you do not have the right to get a job, perhaps. You have a lower quality in terms of education, perhaps. Symbolic threat, on the other hand, is like usually the perception that you are being treated worse All right. The symbolic threat and realistic threat can be connected to one another. All right. In the case of Malaysia, of course, in the, we do have basically a lot of Malay Muslim community, especially perceive that their right, especially their right to practice Islam, is possibly being taken away from them. All right. That could be likely a symbolic threat. They perceive that, they can't be the Muslims that they desire to be somehow. There's actually a propaganda that is being spread around. Okay. Next. Now, we also have what we call as realistic group conflict theory. Now, for the realistic group conflict theory, the idea is that within a society, within a region, within a state, there might be people of many, many groups. Okay. But at the same time, you feel like there's also potential that, some groups might not get all the benefits or all the things that they need because of the scarcity. All right. The scarcity of resources. All right. Or competing goals, right? Resources perhaps just like water, employment, living accommodations, all this. All right, there's basically you feel that you have to compete for it. And when it comes competing for it, you do not see that competing with another individual. You see it competing with another group of people. And you feel that as if the other group is actually threatening your rights or your abilities to have these things. Okay, next. And the last one is, this is the second one, last one is actually social identity theory. Now, social identity theory is the most common one. Now, just now, basically, I talked about self-esteem, right? Okay, the thing about social identity theory is that it believes that every individual person, basically, every one of you have an idea of who you are. Having that idea is clearly important. And you know what it helps? It helps you to have somewhat a good value of yourself. Right? Eventually, it would boost your self-esteem. All right. You don't feel at loss. You feel that you belong somewhere. Okay. Now imagine if, let's say that as part of your identity, you have practices, you have things that you have to do. But imagine if someone else is threatening that, threatening you, telling you, not telling you, not allowing you to practice your religion, for example, not allowing you to basically spread your ideas, for example. So again, I'm gonna go back to perhaps Sakina. I'm so sorry. Let's say that she wants to basically have Hello Kitty to be spread around. Thank you very much. But all of a sudden Micah starting to get upset with her, saying that I don't like Hello Kitty. All right, you're imposing my right to disregard Hello Kitty entirely. All right, okay. And then in that case, basically Sakina might feel that her identity has been threatened. All right. But Micah is also basically devaluing her and what she likes and dislikes. Is that Hello Kitty? No, it's not. But anyway, so the thing is that that's actually one aspect, feeling as if your identity is under threat. So that could be it. But and aside from that, basically, it's also because about the idea that you want to showcase to the people, I'm part of a group. There's a possibility that you yourself are willing to do whatever it takes to sustain that group, and it could be up to the use of violence itself as well. All right. Okay. Next. All right, so this is actually the last psychological theory. It's actually the relative deprivation theory. Now, relative deprivation theory is almost similar to the realistic group conflict theory as well as the integrated threat theory. But the relative deprivation theory is the idea that you feel that you have a certain right that you need to get, but you're not getting it, and you're comparing yourself to someone else. All right. For example, in Malaysia, if I can give you a relevant example, the Chinese, Indians, and Malay communities, what happens is that the Malays perceive that they should basically, we hear this commonly, they should have the right that the Chinese have in terms of economic power. They feel that they don't have that. All right. Okay. Next. All right, Kate. So on top of that, I want to talk about how all these differences, all these factors that can actually contribute to it. For example, the threats that exist and the differences that exist. It can become like a place whereby people start to begin to create an idea, an ideology, basically. This ideology can be really, really strong. All right. It's not Hello Kitty strong for Sakina, but it's very, very strong. Okay. Like for instance, right, for like the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian Israeli issue, that's actually a very very strong kind of like, like I wouldn't say idea, but like it's a story that's happening, but people do have different opinions about it. There are those of the pro-Palestinian, there are also those from the pro-Israeli side. All right, basically they have their own ideology surrounding it, but how does it formulate? Basically what happens is that it's formulated through our social interaction and environmental observation, the culture that we grew up in, the people we are with. But it can become so strong that it causes differences. And if it's actually there's any threat, if you use all the theories that I provided to you just now, the presence of a threat, a mere threat, can basically immediately cause potential violence. All right. Okay, potential violence, potential use of violence. And I want to bring it up to you that basically this ideology that is created, why do people have differences in terms of their ideology, etc.? Again, the social interaction, the place that you're growing up in, and it's almost natural human tendency actually. According to the moral foundation theory, there are certain factors. I'm not going to explore them for now, but what I'm trying to say is that because like, how we have judgment, it can be rather intuitive rather than logical actually. All right, how we create our own idea can be rather intuitive, maybe because it's the way we respond to the environment. All right, usually for survival purposes. All right, for survival purposes, usually rather we identify the one that works best. All right, the one that works best for us. Sometimes we can be. Have you ever like realized that there are moments whereby when you're upset, when you're angry, you might do things that are harmful to you? Let's say you get super stressed with your exams or your assignments, right? Like Hajar was complaining. Yes, I know. Natasha is complaining to me now as well. All right. Um, do you ever do any bad habits? Sleep. Okay. What else? Eating chocolate. What else? Avoid, yes. Basically, avoid anything but doing your assignment, right? Like you would do anything. Like just now when that like Micah was telling me about like how like I mentioned about the refugee situation, people basically blaming the refugees for like for their culture, their behaviors. But you're looking at everything aside from the actual root cause. All right, this is basically because we are rather impulsive creatures sometimes. We do things based on our habit rather than our rational logical thoughts. Okay, and because of this, perhaps our moral judgment creates us to have like an idea about the world in the easiest way possible. All right, you've heard of the term heuristic, right? What's heuristic? Yes, mental shortcuts, right? Mental shortcuts are indeed good. It does help us to survive in terms of like survivability. It does help us. It helps us to make an immediate decision. However, there are situations whereby that might be harmful, right? Like racism, discrimination, these are actually like, as a result of maybe perhaps we have habituated ourselves to react negatively rather than think carefully about what we're doing, how it actually impact the person. So the next time you're doing your assignment, think about your habit, right? Do not discriminate against your assignment. Do not be racist towards it. Realize that it should be your buddy, your best friend. But anyway, going back to this, all right. So, like, consider the fact that humans are rather like intuitive creatures, right? The way we basically decide, perhaps, rather we follow our mental shortcuts rather than realizing that there's actually bigger factors, bigger reasonings behind incidences that happen in our life. All right. If we actually at least proceed with that, maybe perhaps we can reduce existing tensions between us and other groups. Next. How's my time? Is it okay? Okay. All right, Kate. So basically, this frustration, I'm just going to use the term frustration. Basically, you feel like, whatever you want, whatever you need has been thwarted. All right. And you always perceive that the outgroup, someone else out there is basically like, causing this. So then they can basically creates friction between us, between the in group and the out group members. Next. It basically leads to the use of violence. Next. And also, like, we have basically various forms of online aggression. Next. Right, and discrimination as well. Can you guys, do you guys know the picture from the first one? The first picture on the left. You know that one? So I'm not sure how true this is, how authentic this was, but basically, yeah, it was the case whereby the man, he wanted to enter a mosque. All right, it was during the COVID-19 pandemic. He wanted to enter a mosque. Unfortunately, he wasn't actually a local Malaysian. All right. So because of that, he didn't have the registered, like, My Sejahtera app, etc. So basically, he was not allowed to enter the mosque to pray Jum'ah. All right. Okay. However, there were also people spreading rumors the fact that it's not because he didn't have the My Sejahtera app, or maybe he does, but on top of that, it was because he was different. He was not a Malaysian. And to me, this is quite personal because, in Islam that teaches us about, inclusivity, acceptance, etc. How easy it is for us to turn away another fellow Muslim brother just because we are so fearful of a virus that genuinely just came from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala Himself, and then we disregard him. Because the reason why I'm saying this as well is because if he's a Malay, doesn't have a Masjid, people would still welcome him. All right. Okay. Just think of it that way. You're saying all these reasonings, right? But think of it that way. What if he was actually Malay? All right. What if he was actually just someone genuinely young? All right. Would you disregard him? Okay. And the picture on the left is actually a picture of basically the Rohingya refugees arriving in around March 2020 in Malaysia, seeking for refuge, of course. But however, people were panicking. All right. But the thing is that it didn't start there. If we look into the history in Malaysia, especially the tension between the Malaysian and the refugees, especially the Rohingyas, has been around for quite a while. People just bring it up and using the pandemic as an excuse. This is actually a good example of the scapegoating aspect. All right. On top of that, it's also part of the integrated threat theory aspect, the symbolic threat that you can see, the perceived threat, but it's also, we can consider as a realistic threat as well, the COVID-19 itself. Next. Right. So aside from the theories mostly kind of communicates about social group differences. On top of that, we do have individual differences that we do need to highlight. This is highly localized towards you as an individual person. Next. So for example, social dominance. Social dominance is basically a threat. Some social psychologists consider it as a personality trait. Sorry, not threat, trait. All right, it's a personality trait. How many of you have heard of this trait before? Social dominance. No. Okay, so social dominance, have you ever met someone who feels that, there should be a class system? All right, and those people who are on the top of the pyramid deserves basically the best privileges. Those people at the bottom of the pyramid deserve the least. Have you ever met this kind of people before? Yeah. Yeah, the hierarchy, yes, correct. The hierarchy system. Genuinely believe in the hierarchy system and genuinely believe that it should exist. Now, this person does not necessarily mean they're at the top of the system. They could be anywhere in the pyramid. All right? They could be the one at the bottom. It's just basically a genuine belief in the system itself. All right. People who genuinely believe in the system likely feel that people who's in that group should stay in that group, and you're different than. All right, whether you're at the top or at the bottom. All right. Okay. So they perceive that there's the hierarchical system, and that one more privileged and superior group deserves better treatment compared to the lower. And the people at the lower tier of the group can believe that as well. They believe that if you're the privileged one, then yeah, you should enjoy that privilege. I don't deserve that. All right. Next. Then we also have the collective narcissism, quite related to the self-esteem aspect. So for the collective narcissism aspect, do you know narcissistic people are actually insecure? Right. Okay. So why do they become a narcissist then? It's basically, yeah, according to Freud, basically it's sort of like somewhat a defense mechanism for them. All right, okay, a defense mechanism whereby they basically use it. They basically use it to kind of protect themselves from realizing these insecurities. All right, so basically what happens is that people who feel that maybe they have the collective narcissism. So for collective narcissism, it's basically group based. All right, they basically associate with their identity. They want people to validate, to agree that their group is great. All right, so we have what we call as the Malay supremacy movement, for example, right? So for the Malay supremacy, they want the people to believe that their group is great, but it's because they are fearful. They are fearful to recognize that maybe perhaps they're not that good. All right. But the thing is that this is actually rather interesting though, because like, in Islam itself, is that really necessary? All right. Okay. In Islam, we have already been constantly promised within the Quran that we have been created special. All right. We have been created special, and Islam basically is a special religion because it's the only one true religion. All right. We do not necessarily need the external validation itself. But yet there are people, perhaps, I do consider people perhaps who do not really truly inculcate the values of Islam would recognize this. So that is actually genuinely important. Next. All right. There's also the paranoia aspect. All right. The paranoia, basically people like, constantly being fearful, likely as a result of a personal, what do you call that? Experiences, personal traumas, perhaps. All right. Okay, so they basically create a defensive construction of the outgroup, meaning that, like, basically they decided to create an idea about the outgroup themselves. All right, an idea about the outgroup saying that they are bad, they are harmful. All right, likely because they themselves had personal bad experience. All right, so maybe perhaps they create this. But it's not necessarily that they have experienced it themselves. It could be rather vicarious experience, meaning that someone else, they see it within someone else and they perceive that themselves. All right. People can impart like, traumatic feelings onto you when you're young, even though you might not directly experience it. But because the continuous interaction that you have, continuous communication that you have, eventually you could possibly embed it within yourself. Next. All right. So these are some evidences from my research. I'm just going to run through it like very briefly. Next. Okay, so for one of my research, actually, I look at the attitude against immigrants and refugees in Malaysia during COVID-19. So it was indeed found that strong fear of COVID-19 led people to believe that the immigrants are at fault. Eventually, they felt that, these people, they do not deserve the same treatment as local Malaysians. But on top of that, there are also other things. For example, their original attitude itself could be predictive of it. All right, original attitude and also social dominance aspect, feeling that there are people who deserve better treatment and there are people who deserve lower treatment aspect. So it's not just like, the existence of the threat. There are other factors, there are the originating factors, the factors that is relating to the intergroup tension itself causing it, right? Next. All right, okay, so this is basically the further research. And next. Yep. So another thing was that, like, basically overall, like aside from the social dominance trait that I mentioned, the opposite would be the like another related trait is the accommodative trait. You've heard of the term of openness to experience, right? Okay, so openness to experience basically like, the fact that you are willing to try something new. But aside from that, it's also your willingness to communicate with other people who are different than you. All right. In the VIXA, which is basically another personality trait measure, looking at it's mostly suitable for Malaysian culture, of course, looking at the accommodative trait. Basically, your willingness to basically like accommodate, be friends with other people who might be different than you. All right, next. And this one is basically one of the most sensitive issue that we have, Malay Muslims versus others, what makes individuals prone to extremism. So this is the Islamist extremism aspect. Again, it does include, again, so from my research, what I found was that, again, people who are basically sensitive, people who feel like, rather have this existing paranoia that, Islam is under threat, to the point that they're not really addressing it properly. Okay, next. So recommendations that I have basically that, I hope that maybe perhaps we can share on this is basically talking about how maybe perhaps that we talk about the paranoia aspect, the collective narcissism aspect, and also about the intergroup differences aspect. The thing is that one of the things to overcome is that basically training people to understand that these differences will continuously exist. All right, these differences will continuously exist. But what we need to do is basically address the fact that how do we make sure that the causes behind potential, like, tension is being addressed. For example, right, if there is actually a threat, is it a genuine threat? All right, and then address that threat instead of mentioning about, hey, this group caused this group caused that. When in actuality, there could be more efforts, especially from the stakeholders, from the governments itself, and also from the people themselves to actually address the threat rather than perceiving the people as the cause behind it. All right. Other than that, of course, teaching tolerance and further so on and so forth. Next. All right. So in terms of future practice, we can look into intergroup contact, policy improvements, try to educate the young ones, and challenge personal values. Next. All right. My current focus is that what I want to look is basically try to teach about accommodativeness and also trying to look into cognitive flexibility. Now, cognitive flexibility is actually like, rooted within like acceptance commitment therapy apparently. But hopefully like, we can actually try to look at it how it actually fits with the violent extremism, especially terrorism aspect and intergroup tension aspect. Because it's about realizing the fact that sometimes the reason why people are willing to indulge into realizing that they are victims, they are in a bad situation, to the point that they're willing to blame someone else because of their own frustration, is because they cannot see the other side. All right, they cannot see that there's actually actually a genuine reason why it's happening. All right, next. All right. And we need to explore more the impact of intergroup contact early, having childhood interventions, and nurturing the young ones. Right, next. Okay. And also creating counter narratives. I'm gonna just show you this video. I don't know if you can wait. Can you? Is it playing? No, stop playing. Cannot present. That's okay. It's okay. The video. You can? Oh, it's okay. I think I'll have a discussion with the students. All right. Do you guys have any questions, any thoughts, anything you want to actually put forward? Huh? No? Yes. If not, I will ask each one of you ask questions. Yes. Oh, both of you. Okay. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So what's the name of it again? Feudalism. No, it's not really. So that's the thing. Like from the political science perspective, like there are things that I'm not entirely familiar with. But if you can share what's feudalism though, maybe I can connect it. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's watch this video first. Wait. So we can pause it. One second. So what I want to share with you, I think some of you know already. Did any of you join this? Did any of you join this? Maya did. And Alia did. Yeah, you did. Hello. We understand the differences aspect. We understand the fact that yes, we do exist, but like among the things that we need to encourage intergroup contact, and we need to also encourage this understanding that trying to achieve common goals. And one of the things is actually to allow people to come together to learn from one another. So these are some of the events basically run by the government of Malaysia themselves. All right, run by the consistently, and also they've been basically running this almost throughout the year. So this was actually back in March. Okay, it's gone. But anyway, so like let's watch the video. Okay. Thank you.
But I would think it's good.
So perhaps we can have that. Oh, that's nice. So perhaps we can have that kind of activities actually. The thing is that you might think it's simple. It's a simple activity whereby it's just another sports event. But when you think about it, right? It's actually like, one of the things that was actually thought was that like the fact that there's actually similar goals across everyone. And it's also about respecting one another, trying to be inclusive of one another. And the one thing about sport is that the competitiveness aspect, which definitely can get people riled up. All right, especially if they perceive that they need to compete with another person. There's only like, the scarcity of goal, and we talked about that aspect itself. However, it was actually genuinely important for you to realize, despite that, at the end of the day, there's actually another important thing. It's for us to actually genuinely get along with each other, regardless of whatever happens as well. All right, because it's like, once the harm is actually committed, there's no undoing it. All right, okay. Thanks. Alia joined, right? Alia and Humaira. Thank you guys for joining the event. All right, kids. Huh? Yes, feudalism. National. Oh, okay, okay. I've heard of that. Yes. Mm. Definitely. So for the nationalism, as I mentioned just now, you mentioned the 3R, right? Like, and like a lot of students mentioned about how it's basically the racial differences, the group differences. I would say nationalism basically communicates about how how an ideology could emerge. So that ideology itself focuses on like protecting the country itself. All right. So yeah, we can relate it in terms of like how, like, okay, why do people support this nationalism aspect? Is it because of the like identity aspect? All right. Likely it's because of their identity aspect. They perceive that, you're part of it, so you feel like you need to protect it. Okay? Yeah. Any other question? Any thoughts? Yeah. Oh, that's a question.
Okay.
That's okay. Mm-mm. Great, yes. Mm-mm. Ah, so the accommodative trait had a rather negative prediction towards like poor attitude towards immigrants. So meaning that someone who is actually accommodative, someone who is actually willing to actually like be friendly, accept and make changes in terms of just like simple behaviors, in terms of demeanors, etc., with someone who is actually different than them. All right. So let's say, for example, right, you realize, let's just say that, you realize that, hey, there's actually someone, like, coming over to your house, but this person does not pray. All right. This person does not pray, not a Muslim. And then the Maghrib prayer, like, Azan comes. So you'd be like, would you be able to excuse me for a bit? I need to pray. But instead of forcing her saying that you should pray with me, you allow her to actually be herself. So that is someone with an accommodative trait. All right, okay. So how does it relate with the attitude towards immigrants? So the attitude aspect is basically like, we could be positive, effective. It could be cognitive and it could also be behavioral aspect. It's basically how you're treating the immigrant. Do you have a positive thought about the immigrant itself? Do you have a positive feeling about the immigrant itself? Do you actually like, are willing to basically behave in a way that is actually accepting and kind towards the immigrant itself? So if you are a person who's willing to basically like, accommodate, tolerate someone who's different than you, likely you are also going to be having a positive feeling towards someone who's different than you, having a positive thought about someone who's different than you, and willing to behave in a good manner, even though the person is different than you. Okay? Yes, Khadija. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Yes. Yeah. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. It's interesting that you use the word stubborn, because like that's actually very, what's that word? There's a word for it. Ageist. So very, so like be careful as well. You want to include someone who's maybe perhaps like different than you. I understand, but like the reason why is that, like, yeah, the focus has been on the young because we do realize that it's easier to nurture the young people like you guys in here. It's easier to communicate with you, to teach you, and also that you are more open-minded, of course, because you're still kind of like your mindset, your ideas, belief are still kind of under construction. However, for the elderly communities, one of the things that we can highlight is that even though yes, their mindset has been set in stone, the thing is that also they do have the values, like and usually their values, they have a resource or a source where that value comes from. Right? If you identify at least the source where that value comes from, especially usually the older generation, they have people that they look up to. All right, okay. And then in a way that these people they do look up to, you can actually like try to engage with them. All right, these are the modalities that has been suggested. All right. So something that I didn't mention about is that people actually do have role models that they follow when it comes to trying to correct their behavior or trying to actually like identify. Just like as you belong in a group, the reason why you feel that you belong to a group or you want to be part of a group is because you want to be informed how to behave. The same for like even the elderly communities, right? Especially they're actually really good at that. They're really good at trying to say, okay, how do I do, what do I do next, etc. All right, if there's actually at least someone that they genuinely believe in, like there's a group of people they can actually be part of, you can actually slowly nurture them to actually accept, start embracing like good, I would say more positive and progressive values in terms of treating people who are different. Okay, next. Any other question? If not, I will ask you your. Sorry, go on.
Okay, if you have any question, please raise your hands.
They're shy.
Can I ask some question?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, I read this material. Uh, ber- uh, I read about theory that individualistic and collectivism.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Is this related about social theory like this?
Definitely. So individualistic collectivism is basically just it's a cultural difference. Yeah, individualism and collectivism. Basically, in our Southeast Asian, especially the Asian culture, we are more towards the collectivistic aspect. Whereas for people within like the West, they are more individualistic aspect. All right. But in this regard, it's basically very much about the culture aspect. However, the interesting thing is that in terms of like I would say perhaps like social identity, the build up of social identity, there's a possibility a person who basically like act violently towards someone of a different group, in a collectivistic culture, they might do it to protect the group. Whereas people from individualistic culture, really, they generally the reason why they're doing it is unlikely to because of the group for themselves. But like likelihood of extremism occurring, it can occur regardless of whether it's individualistic culture or actually collectivistic culture. Hmm. Right. Thank you for the question. Any other question? Ada apa-apa soalan lagi? Soalan daripada the floor?
Apakah ada pertanyaan?
Kamal ada
teman-teman?
soalan. Hmm. Yes, that's a good question. I actually wanted to ask that. Tukar kosing. Go on. I see. No, like I do understand that there are certain cases of like Islamic extremism, but it's very different compared to Malaysia. Maybe because in Indonesia itself, how many ethnicities do you have here? Many, right? There's many. But in terms of culture, like the fact that despite the different ethnicities, the culture, the practice is almost similar, right? Or no? It's almost similar. So like perhaps that's why they don't have what we have in terms of, because in Malaysia itself we do have quite like like not just diverse, very distinctive cultural practices and religious practices. Yeah. But do tell us, I think it's something that you guys shared about, which is like the Muhammadiyah and what was it? Eh? And you, yeah, Nahdlatul Ulama. I think that's actually interesting. That is actually different though. No, they can't share that. It's a sensitive topic. Don't ask. Don't ask. No, no, it's a sensitive topic. Let's not touch that. But yeah, I feel like Lucas is like, yeah, bahaya, don't touch that. But anyway, in that regard, like in terms of differences, maybe it's not as apparent and transparent as like in Malaysia, because I think the reason why in Malaysia it's very apparent is also like used as a political, like political agenda as well. Yeah. Yes, Khadija, don't ask sensitive questions. Mm-mm. 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 I see. Interesting. I think it'd be fair if is it okay if I ask Aisha to actually share like the difference because it's like we do have like representative from Malaysia talking about our differences in terms of group that could cause conflict. Is it okay if you share Aisha about your story? So Aisha is actually from Kashmir. All right. So there's actually like like interesting issue also happening. If you can share, you want to come here? To share this. Mm, 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 mm. Mm, 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 mm. Mm, 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 mm. I see. Interesting. Mm. Thank you for sharing with us.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come out to the end of the session. Before I close this session, I will like to take a conclusion from the speaker says. There is so many theory that Dr. Miza present in this session. History of intergroup conflict in Malaysia, explanation of intergroup tension,
Mm, mm.
psychological theory like
Yeah,
scapegoating,
correct.
integrated threat theories, realistic group conflict theories, and any other.
Mm,
There is also individual reference that influence this.
mm,
For example, social dominance, collective narcissism, and paranoia.
mm,
I think I want to take a conclusion about the keyword is differences.
mhm,
Yeah. I think differences cause many problems in this
mm,
world.
mm,
But I personally think we are all different,
mm.
and that makes the world beautiful.
True.
I d-
Sorry. Yeah, like
yeah, I think
I think that it'd be good to bring out one of the important verses, isn't it, from Al Hujurat?
okay.
Yeah. Verily we have created you in tribes so that you may get to know one another. Mhm,
Okay, I think that's all the conclusion of the session.
mhm,
I'd like to thanks to the presenter for the informative and interesting presentation, and all the participants for the very active participation. Finally, uh, last give the applause for Dr. Miza. Thank you for your attention, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam. Yes. Thank you.
We give some.
Thank you, Brother Hanif, as the moderator, and Dr. Miza for the lecture. After this, we will have another break before we go to our next session. And yes, we will have a break for Asar prayer.